and welcome back to RPMbassy. Today we're talking about an album which I'm just going to say I don't recommend you buy on vinyl. The sort of easily accessible version that you can get these days, it's not a fantastic version to pick up. When people sort of talk about mastering and mixing and things like that, this is a great example of how a master can really change the vibe of an album and kind of, for me at least, kind of takes a lot out of the enjoyment of it. But the album we're talking about is the debut album, self-titled, from Alexisonfire. So this is October 31st of 2002. The Canadian band Alexisonfire from St. Catharines in Ontario. They released this, and this is like I would say a cornerstone of the sort of screamo genre. Certainly the early noughties sort of screamo sound and emo post-hardcore kind of vibe that was going on during that time. This is one of those albums where I think looking back, like, you can see how it would have been quite an integral album for that era, but actually at the time it didn't perform super well, despite how great it is as a album in terms of composition and the songs on there. Like, even in like the Canadian charts, their own sort of local charts, it got to like something like 137. Like it didn't scratch the top 100, not even close. Which is a real shame, but thankfully this is an album that easily has sort of had its flowers dozens and dozens of times over since then, and has sort of gone on to be regarded as, if not just one of the band's best albums, but one of the best sort of in that subgenre and in sort of the wider emo kind of sphere. But yeah, this is musically, this is a phenomenal album, and I would say very, very possibly could be my favourite of the band, and certainly of that kind of era. This really holds up as one of the absolute greats. Starts off with an amazing track, .44 caliber Love Letter, which is such a raw, interesting tapped guitar lead intro. Really like simple, but it's kind of iconic, and it's one of those ones where that's gone on to become such a mainstay of their live sets. It's sort of one of those ones where if you want to get the crowd to pop, you've got to play that song because that intro is so iconic. But like a really great song to start the album off with, just like kind of sets the tone perfectly. You have George Petit, the sort of unclean vocalist, his sort of screams, which are borderline incomprehensible on this album. Like over the years, he's kind of slowly but surely brought himself into being a bit more understandable. But this album is, there's a lyric sheet with it, but half of it means nothing. And then obviously Dallas Green, guitarist and clean vocalist, who kind of, he presents this kind of amazing kind of yin to the yang kind of thing of the clarity and the sort of soulfulness in his vocals. It's such a great dichotomy between the two. And yeah, 44 caliber Love Letter is like a great way to start the album off with that. This album does also have, in my opinion, the best Alexisonfire song ever made, which is the final track, Pulmonary Archery. And that's, for me, why this version in particular isn't the one to get. And this version specifically is a release from Dine Alone Records. This is a remaster from 2014, so sort of 12 years on from the initial release, and sort of 10 years on from the release of this album sort of first coming out in the UK, where it was sort of packaged with their second album. It's an issue that's present across the entire album, but Pulmonary Archery is kind of like that really stands out, where the remaster has gone in and taken guitar layers. It's taken tracks that were very subtle in the original release, and it's brought those up. It's taken things that were, in my opinion, quite integral and taken those down. The drums on the remaster are, on paper, I suppose you could say they are a better mix, but I think they are sort of totally ruined. And the drums are so important in heavy music, especially, not just every kind of music they're important, but in heavy music they are so integral. And the sort of the punch and the life of the drums has kind of been sucked out of them with this remaster, where it's become really clinical and just so so fake sounding almost. And yeah, Pulmonary Artery is where that really stands out. If you're familiar with the tracks, obviously it's going to stand out across the album, but that intro for Pulmonary Artery, they butchered that thing, which is a real shame. And it almost feels like certain parts where they've like added layers. I don't think they did, but like some of the subtleties have been brought up to a point where they are no longer subtle. If you're familiar with the song, it starts off with this phenomenal like ambient guitar intro, which that part is kind of okay, but the joy of the song, the bit that really for me has stuck with me for so long from when I first heard the album, is where it goes from that sort of ambient intro into the sort of heavy guitar part where it kind of picks up and you have like these bass hits, you have the hit of the drums, and everything kind of comes in all at once. And the original, there's such a swell in volume, and like the energy of the song is it sort of turns it up to another level. On this, because it's been so processed and compressed, and like they've limited it to within an inch of its life, there's no dynamics at all, and it kicks in, but there's no volume step up. There's nothing that kind of brings that kind of excitement to it. It's still a great song, but the listening experience, just there's something not right, there's something missing, and it's a real shame. It really like devalues the experience of the album. And as I said, it's present throughout the whole album. So I would say if you can get an original copy, an original LP version of this, like, do try. If you find it for anything less than sort of like £150, you have found yourself an amazing bargain, because they go for silly money all the time. And, it's something I'd love to have, but I'm going to have to stick with this version for the time being, unfortunately. Other tracks on here, you've got Polaroids of Polar Bears, again, another phenomenal ambient intro. I think that the ambient intros and the clean guitar parts are what really actually shine on this album, despite it being a heavy album. Those parts just like highlight the heaviness of the rest of the album. So that, as with the vocals, the dichotomy between clean and unclean, it really just like stellar on this album. So yeah, Polaroids, Polar Bears, really great song. A Dagger Through the Heart of St. Angeles, that again has a really amazing clean passage. Dallas Green's vocals across this whole album are phenomenal, and I think he, as a clean vocalist, much like George, their vocals have developed over the years, and they've both become more sort of accomplished and more sort of well trained over the years. But there's the rawness in Dallas Green's vocals, which is sort of present on here, where you just get those sort of slight voice cracks, the fact that he's a younger guy, he's not 100% sort of fully trained, they haven't got years of touring behind them, those sort of vocal cracks and things, they add a real like raw emotion to it, which I don't sort of miss on newer stuff, but it's a different flavour, which is really enjoyable on this. As for the presentation itself, you've got the classic sort of knife fight front cover, which a lot of people love, and the internal fold out as well. I've read that there's a couple of different schools that people have said that this uniform is from. My understanding is that this is the school that Dallas Green went to, and that's where the sort of covers and everything was shot, but I don't know 100% if that's true, because I've seen like 4 or 5 different schools in the sort of St. Catharines area of Ontario mentioned, and no one sort of seems to be 100% sure whether or not any of them are correct. As for the record itself, pretty basic version, just your standard black vinyl with that nice sort of green and white motif on the label. It's perfectly pleasant to look at. There are some other versions from this remaster, this sort of set of pressings. You've got like a clear, I think there's a green one as well. But as I said, this pressing isn't good to listen to, so I wouldn't worry too much. And you do have your inside liner as well. Again, knife fight motif. And your lyric sheet and thank yous, etc. So pretty basic package. As I said, this is not the one to pick up if you are looking for the original sound. It's been remastered and buggered about with. Doesn't hit the mark as far as I'm concerned. As an album, just as a product, as a presentation, as a work of art from a band, this is still a 10 out of 10, and I think is, you know, Pulmonary Archery is the best post-hardcore song ever made, in my opinion, like bar none. But this particular release of that album, we're talking like a 3 or a 4 out of 10 at the very best. Like they really butchered it. Yeah, the Dine Alone release, do avoid if you can. Listen to any other possible version that you can out there, because all the other versions, the original versions, you know, rawness and, you know, any sort of issues are so they're made up for tenfold in the fact that the mix and the master on that original version is just so much more rich and interesting to listen to. So seek that out if you can find the original. Best of luck to you. Hope you've got a fairly heavy wallet, because it is not going to be cheap. But yeah, listen to the original. If you have to get a hold of a copy and you don't want to spend a lot, this is there as an option. There's plenty of them out there. But yeah, Alexisonfire, the only band ever. They're great. This album's great. Just don't get this version. Cheers.